Hi, I'm Christine Tizard and I am the three-way chef, and today I'm going to teach you 3 different ways to make pie pastry. We're going to do a traditional, straight up, classic pie pastry. We're going to do a gluten-free one, and then we're going to do a paleo press-in pie crust. Let's start off with my pastry crust. So here I have my 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to want to salt this. So a nice pinch of salt. Just mix that through. And I am going to use a mixture of butter and lard. I know some of you are thinking lard, ew, but I will show you why I'm using lard in a little bit, but I'll start with my butter. And since we're doing all of this by hand, and I don't personally like to cut in the butter, I just grate it. I grate my butter. So we're going to need 2/3 of a cup of really cold butter. So I have my butter. Oh, look at all that butter. And I'm going to put right in here, and I'm going to just toss that all with the flour, and I'm going to get my lard. So this I actually keep in the freezer. So this is actually pastured pork lard, and it just makes the pastry crust super flaky. So I'm going to need about 1/3 of a cup of this. Once again, I'm going to grate that. So if you are looking for pork lard, what you can do is just go around and ask your butchers or your local butcher. A lot of them will have it or can source it for you. If you don't have lard, or can't find a good source for it, just use all butter. It's fine. And I'm going to toss that with the flour. So what I like to do is I like to coat all of these pieces of butter and lard in the flour first. I try to do this part as quickly as possible. Just because I want to keep that butter nice and cold. We can add our ice cold water. My hands are going to stay really super dirty for this, so excuse me. So anywhere between 4 and 6 tablespoons of really ice cold water. So I'm going to add 4, along with a little bit of vanilla extract just to add some flavor. And I'm just going to get in there with my hands. So it's at this point in time, I kind of look at it and I'm like, oh, it's still really loose, so I know that I have to add a little bit more water. And it's when I can feel it holding together like that, that's when I can transfer it down on my board. I'll move my pie plate out of the way, butter out of the way, and I'm going to knead it into 2 balls. So typically a pie pastry recipe will give you enough to do 2 shells, so that'll be 1 double crust pie or 2 single crust pies. And this is all just a matter of like kneading and feeling it out until you get it all to kind of come together, and then we're going to split it into 2 round discs. See, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for it all to just come together. I'm going to divide it in half. Looks like about half. One aside, and then make my little disc with this. Now it's okay if it looks really crumbly, because the next trick to making and rolling out a perfect pie pastry is that you have to let this rest. And while this rests in the fridge, what's going to happen is the water is going to start to soak up the flour, and it's actually going to start forming into like a tighter ball, which is great. I'm going to get out some saran wrap, put it all into a nice disc, and we'll wrap this up. So these will go into the fridge at least 30 minutes. Ideally, I like to do this the day before. If I do it the day before, it rolls out so much better. So these 2 guys I made yesterday, so they have been resting very patiently overnight in my fridge. Typically, because they've been chilled for a while, I like to just let them out at room temperature for maybe 5 minutes, just a little bit, just so they're not so hard to roll out. And I'm going to show you how to roll out one of these. I have an old, clean pillowcase. I like to use this because I find it makes rolling out the pastry dough really easy. So I'm just going to put it down on my surface, and I'm going to flour it really well. So what happens is the flour gets into all the grooves of the cotton, which is great. So you can reuse this over and over again. Just store it somewhere in your drawer. And the great thing about using a pillowcase is that instead of having to pick up your pastry all the time and rotate it, all you have to do is rotate the pillowcase, which makes it easier. So I'm gonna just flour both sides and we can start rolling this out. So, rolling pin, and we can start rolling. So I typically do up and down, back and forth, think of a clock. Kind of want to roll away from you. You want to try to keep it into a circle and try to keep it into one piece without it cracking too much. And when you think you have it like to the right size, I usually just take my pie plate and I put it over top. You know, give that as a reference. I'm just going to dust it with a little bit more flour. Don't want it to stick. There's a couple ways that you can place this in here. One way is to roll it over the rolling pin, and you have to do this really gently. You don't want it to crack, and you're just going to roll it over the rolling pin like so, really loose. And then you can put your pie plate in there and then just roll it back over top so it fits in. Oh, it looks pretty good. I have a couple little cracks, which is totally fine. Just press it down, move it around a little bit, and get it in there just like so. If you have a couple little cracks, just press them down, no problem. Couple different ways you can trim it. I personally like to use shears, and I'm also going to show you how I would blind bake this. So a lot of recipes, they will tell you to blind bake your pastry crust first. And what I do to do that is I get a piece of parchment out. And I have a nice round here like this. This fits right in here. If you want to cut the round perfect to the size, take a piece of parchment. I'm going to cut it into a square, or fold it into a square, and you're just going to keep folding. It's like arts and crafts here. So folding and folding, and then you can judge from the middle there that I need something that's around this big, so perfect. And then you have your parchment circle. Perfect, that fits right on top of here. So if I'm blind baking this, typically I'll put it in the oven at around 425 for maybe about, 8 to 10 minutes. You just want it to look kind of dry, but look at the recipe first because a lot of recipes are a little bit different. You want to weigh this down. So I have a big bag of leftover rice and beans that I just keep on using over and over again as my pie weights. So put them in. This will weigh everything down. And then you can blind bake this in the oven, and that's it. That's good to go. And next, I'm going to show you how to make a gluten-free pie crust. So the next pastry crust is a gluten-free pastry crust. I tend to buy this pre-made gluten-free flour. This is just cup for cup. The one thing you want to make sure when you're buying a gluten-free flour, all-purpose flour mix, is you want to double check to make sure whether this xanthan is in there or not, because if it's not in there, then you're going to have to add a little bit of it in there. And typically, I think it's anywhere from a half a teaspoon to 3/4 of a teaspoon, but just check your recipe just to make sure, because sometimes it's a little bit different. So I have my 2 cups of flour, and I'm going to do a sweet pastry here, so this is perfect for pies or a sweet pie. If you want to do something savory, of course don't add the sugar. So just a little bit of sugar, a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons, which is great. Mix that in there. I'm also going to add just a little pinch of salt as well. And just to show you something different that you can do with any pie pastry that you make, so you can add lime zest. You could, if you're doing a savory pastry, you could add like some picked thyme leaves. So a little bit of orange zest. I'm just going to pulse it a couple times to mix that up. And then I'm going to add in my butter. So half a cup for this recipe. Just going to pulse that together. Break up that butter a little bit. Great, there's nice pieces of butter throughout. I'm going to add in my egg. Now what you're looking for is a nice crumbly looking sand. take a look. It's nice and sandy, perfect. And now we can add our water. So I just do this kind of a tablespoon at a time while it's on, until it forms into a dough. Let's take a look-see. Yeah, it's holding together really nicely. I'm just gonna pulse it another few times. And now I'm gonna dump it out. We'll split it into two so we can have 2 pie shells. Really easy gluten-free dough. We added the egg in there. It's going to make up for some of that moisture because there's no gluten in this flour, and it's also going to help this dough roll out easily. That's why the egg's in there. Just split it in 2, make our 2 rounds. And we can wrap that up. Just make a little disc, and we'll put that in the fridge. And that's ready to be rolled out whenever you're gonna make your next pie. Perfect, gluten-free pie dough. Third recipe, a paleo pie crust recipe. What makes this paleo? Well, I'm not using any grains. There's no flour. There's no sugar even. It's basically just a lot of almond flour, really, and some stuff to stick it together. I'm gonna use a food processor again. So we'll place our almond flour, 2 cups, we'll place right in there. I'm gonna add a little bit of flavor with some salt, and I wanna add a little bit of cinnamon. I think that's nice, especially with the almonds. So, you know, half a teaspoon, just a little bit of flavoring. And I'll mix this up just to pulse that cinnamon. And then we'll add our egg. It's gonna help it stick together. And coconut oil. It's gonna give it a nice coconut flavor too, depending on what type of oil you use. And you're just looking for it to come together. Yeah, just like that, perfect. Pie plate, dump it all in, and just press it out. You just want to cover the whole entire pie plate. I wish I could sing. It would be perfect here if I could sing you guys a song. So you just keep pressing and pressing. You want to get a nice even layer. You want to get it up the sides. It is a little greasy. You can feel the coconut oil in there, and plus all that really nice almond flour, but that's great. It's going to bake up really nicely in the oven. And you can use this for any recipe, really. I decided to use one of these for a pumpkin pie that I did yesterday, and it turned out really nice. I'm just gonna show it to you. I'm gonna lay that aside. So yeah, that's it, ready to go. That's what it looks like. The one thing you might wanna do is you just wanna dock it, and you should do this with any pie crust anyways. This is called docking. You just wanna poke it a couple times, and it helps the middle from rising up in the center. So just dock it a couple times. So that's ready to go. That's ready to be baked. And, oh yeah, here is the one I made yesterday. So typical pumpkin pie filling with some whipped cream. It looks really good. Paleo pie crust, perfect for any holiday. So there you have it, 3 different great ways to make pie pastry. We did straight up classic with butter and lard. We did a gluten-free, which is really, really easy to make. And we did a paleo press-in. So enjoy. If you like what you saw today, like, subscribe, comment. I want to know what you would like me to try in the kitchen. A recipe or an ingredient, 3 ways.